to The Explainer. Today, we're going to tackle a really fascinating, kind of controversial claim about one of literature's giants, Charles Dickens. It's an argument that says his real masterpiece, well, it's probably not the one you're thinking of. So this all started with the acclaimed critic F.R. Leavis. He threw a real curveball at the literary world, basically telling everyone they needed to take a second look at everything Dickens ever wrote. And his big bombshell argument was this. The single greatest book Dickens ever wrote isn't one of the big epics, like Bleak House or Great Expectations. Nope, he said it was the short, often ignored novel, Hard Times. Okay, so let's get into it. Hard Times? Really? What on earth did Leavis see in a book that, honestly, most other critics just kind of brushed aside as a minor work? Well, for Leavis, this wasn't just about the book being good. He was making a much bigger point. He said it had this unique power, this artistic completeness, a kind of focus that he felt, you just don't find in Dickens's other more sprawling novels. So you have to ask, why was his take so radically different? Well, it's pretty simple. Everyone else was picking up Hard Times expecting that classic Dickens experience, the huge, messy, vibrant worlds, and they just didn't find it. But Leavis argued they were judging it by the wrong standards entirely. And this gets us to the core of his whole argument. Leavis proposed a totally new lens for looking at this book. He basically said, look, you're all looking for the wrong thing. You want that big, sprawling, messy Victorian life that Dickens is famous for, and in doing that, you're completely missing the book's real point, which is incredibly sharp and focused. For Leavis, Hard Times isn't a novel in the traditional sense. He called it a moral fable. Now, what's that? It's a story where everything, every single character, every event is there for a reason. It's all symbolic, all serving one big, powerful message. There's just no fat to trim. And once you see it that way, it totally changes how you read the book, right? You're not supposed to be looking for that chaotic, lifelike world. What you get instead is something way more focused, a powerful, and I mean relentless, takedown of an entire way of thinking. So this fable structure is basically the perfect stage for a huge symbolic battle. And we're not just talking about a conflict between characters. It's a clash between two completely different ways of life. And wow, does Dickens illustrate this battle brilliantly. You have this classic scene, right? The cold, hard philosophy of facts, facts, facts. That's Thomas Gradgrind and his star student, Bitzer, up against the warmth and, the realness of human experience, which is embodied by Sissy Jupe, the girl from the circus. Think about it. Sissy represents actual, real-world vitality. She knows what a horse is because she grew up with them. Bitzer, on the other hand, can only spit out a definition from a book. He's just this hollow, mechanical product of the system. So where does all of Sissy's warmth and vitality come from? The circus. And for Leavis, the circus is so much more than just entertainment. He sees it as the symbolic antidote, the cure, for the soul-crushing industrial world of Coketown. It stands for everything Coketown isn't: art, skill, spontaneity, and joy. And that contrast really is the heart of the whole book. You've got the gray, monotonous, fact-obsessed Coketown on one side, and the colorful, vibrant, deeply human circus on the other. For Leavis, that's it. That is the entire story. Okay, so we've got the setup. But what happens when this facts-only philosophy actually gets tested in the real world? Well, the plot is basically one long, tragic demonstration of the human cost. I mean, the whole plot just hammers this one point home again and again. When you take this philosophy of pure fact and cold self-interest and you apply it to actual human beings, the results are just catastrophic for everyone. And for Leavis, this scene right here is the moment that life itself just smashes the philosophy to pieces. Gradgrind is literally staring at the human wreckage created by his own ideas, and his whole system of cold, hard facts has absolutely no answer for it. But the most brutal, devastating blow, it doesn't come from one of the system's failures. It comes from its biggest success, Bitzer. Because when Gradgrind is desperate and begs for a little bit of mercy, he's appealing to something human, to a heart. And what does Bitzer do? He responds with pure, cold, Gradgrind logic. He operates on nothing but self-interest, exactly like he was taught. In that moment, the system's perfect product turns around and becomes its creator's judge, jury, and executioner. It's just perfectly ironic.
All right, so that brings us to the final verdict. How does Leavis wrap all this up? Well, he makes his closing argument and he starts by admitting, the novel isn't perfect.
And this is actually what makes his whole case so strong. He's upfront about the book's flaws. He says, yeah, Stephen Blackpool is way too sentimental, and Dickens's understanding of politics here is pretty weak. By admitting that, it makes his praise for the rest of the book feel so much more credible. Because despite those weaknesses, Leavis's conclusion is that the book's artistic power, its incredible language, and its laser-focused moral vision are just unmatched in any other Dickens novel. He sees Dickens not just as a novelist here, but as a great poet, capturing life with this amazing energy.
And really, that's the whole key. For Leavis, Hard Times works brilliantly, not as a sprawling novel, but as a tight, profound, and devastatingly effective moral fable. When you judge the book for what it is, instead of what it isn't, that's when you see its true, one-of-a-kind genius.
So that leaves us with one last question to chew on. Can a book's flaws actually be part of its genius? I mean, what if the book's tight focus, the very thing that causes those flaws we talked about, is also the exact source of its unique and unforgettable power? It's a fascinating thought, and it might just make you rethink what a masterpiece really is.